drones fly into Polish airspace. Russian aircraft violates Estonian airspace. These are not accidents. They are deliberate provocations, a pinprick strategy designed to test allied defences, political resolve, and response times. These actions force NATO to respond, consume allied resources, and are intended to normalise a state of heightened tension, gradually eroding the threshold for what is considered an act of aggression. These calculated probes are a small but telling part of a much larger campaign. The Russian Federation of Mordor is engaged in a long-term, systematic campaign to dismantle the post-Cold War security order in Europe. Its primary strategic objective, as I see it, is to fracture the transatlantic alliance and subordinate the continent to its will. This campaign is waged not through overwhelming strength, but through a calculated strategy of incremental aggression, hybrid warfare, and psychological manipulation via nuclear threats. That being said, it is my belief even a united Europe without America possesses a decisive and overwhelming advantage in every metric of national power: economic, demographic, industrial, and potential military might. And that the principal obstacle to European security is not a lack of capacity, but a deficit of unified political will. Eight months into the second Trump presidency, the long-held European concerns about the Putin-Trump dynamic have materialised into a tangible crisis, fundamentally altering the 75-year-old transatlantic security alliance that has been the bedrock of the continent's stability. The administration's actions since its inauguration have confirmed European leaders' fears of a fundamental shift in US foreign policy that could favour Russian interests. The apprehension that defined European analysis prior to the presidency has now been replaced by a scramble to react to concrete US policy shifts in three primary areas: the future of NATO, the war in Ukraine, and the potential overall erosion of the Western alliance. In the Kremlin, the map of the world is viewed through a different lens. For the blood midget Vladimir Putin, the strength of the West is not a source of stability, but a direct obstacle to restoring not only Russian influence, but Russian ownership of former territories. The strategy is a classic of geopolitical statecraft: divide and conquer, much like Putin does with his own military, generals, infrastructure, basic fabric of Mordor itself. The blood midget understands that a united NATO, led by the military and economic might of the United States, is a fortress he cannot breach in his wildest dreams. But a Europe left to its own devices, that potentially is a different story. In the eyes of the Kremlin, without America as the anchor of NATO, the entire security architecture of the continent is fundamentally altered. The American nuclear umbrella, the vast logistical power, the sheer scale of its military-industrial complex. These are the pillars that have guaranteed European sovereignty and security from Russia's aggression for generations. In Putin's mind, if that pillar were to be removed, each European nation, no matter how strong, suddenly looks much more vulnerable. For a country like Estonia, violations of its airspace are not merely isolated provocations. They are calculated components of a broader strategy aimed at fracturing the transatlantic alliance by decoupling American and European security interests. This approach, if left unchecked, places frontline NATO nations like Estonia in a position of extreme vulnerability and seeks to dismantle the collective strength of the coalition, one member at a time. At the heart of these airspace violations is a deliberate test of NATO's collective defensive commitment, enshrined in Article 5 of the North Atlantic Treaty. By repeatedly probing the alliance's borders, Moscow aims to gauge reaction times, identify procedural weaknesses, and create a sense of normalization around its aggressive behavior. The goal is to sow doubt among member states about the credibility of the collective security guarantee. If these incursions are met with hesitant or divided responses, it signals to Russia that the alliance's resolve is weakening. This strategy is particularly aimed at creating a wedge between the United States and its European allies. By portraying European security as a regional issue that does not directly impact American interests, Russia hopes to foster a sense of alliance fatigue in Washington. The narrative is that the US should not be drawn into distant European conflicts, thereby isolating European nations and making them more susceptible to Russian pressure. Countries like Estonia, which shares a direct border with Russia, these actions represent an immediate and existential threat. The Baltic states have long warned of Russia's revanchist ambitions, and the ongoing war in Ukraine has only amplified these concerns. Their geographic location makes them particularly susceptible to a rapid, localized conflict that could be initiated in a quick time frame before the Western alliance had time to react. Should Russia perceive a lack of unified resolve within NATO, the strategic calculation would be that a swift, decisive move would present the alliance to have a choice between a full-scale war with a nuclear power or the abandonment of a fellow member. This scenario would effectively shatter the principle of collective defense and achieve Russia's long-standing goal of neutralizing NATO as a cohesive military force. The 2022 invasion of Ukraine was the culmination of a 3-decade pattern of military interventions designed to assert Russian dominance in its near abroad and prevent the consolidation of sovereign, pro-Western states on its borders. This strategy of salami slicing, taking small, incremental actions that individually do not warrant a massive response, but collectively achieve a major strategic goal, is evident in a clear historical timeline of aggression. Transnistria, Moldova, 1992. Shortly after the collapse of the USSR, Russia intervened militarily to support separatists in Moldova's Transnistria region. This created a frozen conflict that persists to this day, effectively prevented Moldova from exercising full sovereignty over its territory and serving as a permanent source of Russian leverage. Chechnya, 1994 to 2009. Russia waged 2 exceptionally brutal wars to crush the Chechen independence movement. These conflicts established a template for the use of overwhelming and often indiscriminate force to maintain control within its perceived borders and served as a training ground for the modern Russian military. Georgia, 2008. In what is now regarded as the first European war of the 21st century, Russia launched a full-scale invasion of Georgia under the pretext of protecting the population in the separatist regions of South Ossetia and Abkhazia. The invasion was a direct response to Georgia's aspirations to join NATO and resulted in the long-term Russian occupation of 20% of Georgian territory. This set a clear and unambiguous precedent for the use of military force to punish neighbours seeking Western integration. Ukraine, Phase 1, 2014. Following Ukraine's pro-Western revolution of dignity, Russia executed a covert operation to annex the Crimean Peninsula, using forces without insignia, the infamous Little Green Men. Simultaneously, it instigated and militarily supported a separatist war in Ukraine's Donbass region, initiating an 8-year attritional conflict designed to destabilize the country and prevent its westward drift. Syria, 2015. Russia's direct military intervention in the Syrian civil war was a decisive move to project power beyond its immediate neighborhood. By saving the collapsing regime of Bashar al-Assad, at least for a while, Moscow secured its strategic naval base in the Mediterranean, again, at least for a while. It also demonstrated its capability as a global power broker and tested new weapons and tactics that would later be used in Ukraine. This consistent pattern reveals a strategic logic: use military force to create and sustain conflicts on the periphery, thereby arresting the sovereignty of neighbouring states and challenging the Western-led security order incrementally. However, it would be a grave mistake to portray Europe as helpless, even if it were to stand alone. That is precisely the narrative Vladimir Putin wants the world and Europe itself to believe. The truth is, Europe has the capacity. Combined, the economies of the European Union dwarf that of Russia. Its population is more than 3 times larger. It possesses world-leading technology and a formidable industrial base. A united Europe could build a defence force capable of standing on its own and deterring any Russian aggression. The question has never been about capacity. It has always been about political will. The will to unify defence spending, to integrate military commands, to forge a common strategic vision, and to accept the immense costs and responsibilities America has shouldered for so long. And I fully agree with that. Europe needs to step up. This, however, is the fracture point Putin works to exploit every single day, through disinformation campaigns that fuel anti-American sentiment, through political interference that supports isolationist voices. A huge victory for Mordor would be to see that the ties that bind the West together grow weak. His ultimate aim is to see Europe fragmented and uncertain, facing Russia alone. The power is there, the potential is there, but a house divided against itself cannot stand, and that is the outcome for which the Kremlin patiently waits. Russia's entire strategy is predicated on a single, crucial assumption: that Europe lacks the unity, the resolve, and the willingness to endure the costs necessary to defend itself and its values. The Kremlin wagers that European democracies, with their complex political processes, diverse national interests, and inherent aversion to conflict, can be paralysed. It believes that the fear of nuclear escalation, the discomfort of economic disruption, and the political friction of coalition building will always prevent Europe's immense potential from being translated into decisive action. Every hostile act, every drone that strays into Polish airspace, every nuclear threat broadcast from Moscow is a calculated move in this psychological war. Each is designed to test Europe's resolve, to sow friction among allies, and to reinforce the narrative of paralysis, convincing European citizens and their leaders that the price of meaningful resistance is simply too high. The only response that can defeat such a strategy is the demonstration of unbreakable resolve. Appeasement or hesitation merely validates Russia's core assumption and invites further aggression. The path to securing Europe's future lies in the conscious, collective decision to awaken the sleeping giant. This requires immediate, sustained, and transformative action. It demands that European nations meet and exceed their defense spending commitments, not as a concession to allies, but as a fundamental investment in their own survival. It requires harnessing Europe's vast and sophisticated industrial base to rapidly expand the production of munitions, drones, air defense systems, and other critical military hardware, turning economic potential into hard-hitting power. Above all, it requires the political unity to present a credible and unbreakable front against Russian coercion, making it clear that any aggression against one will be met with the full weight of all. The challenge is significant, but it is a manageable security threat for a continent that possesses all the necessary tools for success. For decades, European security has been underwritten by the transatlantic alliance, a dependency that has allowed a deficit of strategic responsibility to grow. That era is over. The confrontation with an expansionist Russia has presented Europe with an imperative to finally assume the burden of its own defense, to unleash its continental power, and to secure its own future. The only missing ingredient is the collective will to act.